In this episode, we are looking at one of the most powerful and long-lasting empires in history, an empire whose influence still shapes the modern world. For centuries, the Ottoman Empire stood at the center of the known world, bridging Europe, Asia, and Africa. It brought down the Byzantine Empire and governed the holy cities of Islam. At its height, it ruled from the gates of Vienna to the deserts of Arabia, from the Balkans to North Africa. European powers defined themselves in opposition to it. Trade routes shifted around it. Wars were fought to resist, contain, and eventually dismantle it. Not few, but centuries of sustained conflict across 3 continents. The phrase, the empire on which the sun never sets, usually associated with the British, can also be applied to the Ottomans, a reminder of its extraordinary scale and longevity. The empire lasted for more than 600 years, longer than Britain's period as an imperial power. But scale alone doesn't explain its story. The real question is how a small Anatolian principality rose to dominate 3 continents for centuries, and why it struggled to adapt to a changing world, ultimately collapsing at the end of the First World War and reshaping the Middle East and southeastern Europe. To understand the Ottoman Empire, we must go back more than 2 centuries before its foundation. In the 11th century, Anatolia was Byzantine. However, as the century progressed, much of the region fell under control of the Seljuk Empire, a Turco-Persian Sunni Muslim empire. A key turning point came in 1071 at the Battle of Manzikert, where Seljuk forces defeated the Byzantines, opening much of Anatolia to Turkic migration and settlement. Over time, the Seljuks established a Sunni Muslim state across Anatolia. They did not, however, create lasting stability, and in the 13th century, Mongol invasions shattered the region and Seljuk authority collapsed. Anatolia fragmented into a series of small principalities, the beyliks, each ruled by a bey, a local warlord who owed allegiance to the Mongols but operated with considerable autonomy. There was no single dominant power in Anatolia during this time. The Byzantine Empire in the west was weakened but still present. The Mongols in the east were distant overlords rather than direct rulers, and along this shifting frontier between Christian and Muslim territories, opportunities existed for ambitious leaders. One such leader was named Osman, who controlled a beylik located in northwestern Anatolia near the Byzantine frontier. His territory was modest, and he led bands of Oghuz Turk horsemen, or Ghazis, who raided neighbouring Christian lands. What distinguished Osman was not the size of his domain, but the position of it, on the fault line between the declining Byzantine Empire and fractured Anatolian rivals. By 1299, with Seljuk power gone and Mongol authority in Anatolia in steep decline, Osman began asserting independence. This is a traditional date for the foundation of the Ottoman state, less a formal declaration than a reflection of a changing reality. The frontier was open, old powers were fading, and Osman moved to fill the vacuum. Osman's success was not inevitable. Many beyliks fought, raided, and competed. However, as most disappeared, the Ottomans survived and expanded because they combined 3 advantages: geography, military mobility, and political pragmatism. From the earliest years, they expanded steadily into weakened Byzantine territory. Their mounted forces were mobile and adaptable, and critically, when they conquered new lands, they often preserved local administration and allowed Christian populations to retain their religion in exchange for loyalty and taxation. Chroniclers tell a famous story about Osman. He dreamed of a great tree growing from his chest, its branches spreading across the world. Whether true or not, it shows how later generations saw the dynasty, not as raiders, but as a divinely favoured empire. If Osman founded the state, his son Orhan built it. When Osman died in 1324, he left Orhan a functioning principality with momentum behind it. Orhan was equally ambitious and demonstrated his military prowess in 1326 by capturing Bursa. Bursa became the first true Ottoman capital, a centre of administration and trade. It marked the moment the Ottomans truly became a state. Nicaea and Nicomedia fell in quick succession, ending Byzantine's grip on northwestern Anatolia. But Orhan's most significant move came in the 1350s, when the Ottomans crossed into Europe. An earthquake damaged Byzantine fortifications at Gallipoli. Ottoman forces seized the opportunity and took the fortress. This foothold on European soil changed everything. It opened the Balkans to Ottoman expansion and shifted the centre of gravity of the empire. Shortly afterwards, the Ottomans captured Adrianople, modern Edirne, which became their new capital. From this point on, the Ottomans were not just an Anatolian power, they were a European one. Orhan also began the military reforms that would define the empire. He created the first standard infantry units, the early predecessors of the Janissaries, more on those shortly. He minted the first Ottoman coins, a symbol of sovereignty, and he laid the administrative foundations that his son would later expand. When Orhan died in 1362, he left behind a state that was organized and expanding. If Orhan built a functioning state, his son Murad turned it into a disciplined imperial machine. He formalized the Janissaries, creating the first modern professional standing army in Europe. To sustain it, he introduced the Devshirme, the levy of Christian boys taken from the Balkans, converted and trained for service. The most capable became Janissaries. Others rose as administrators and statesmen. This system became one of the pillars of Ottoman power for centuries. Militarily, Murad pushed deep into the Balkans. In 1371, at the Battle of Maritsa, Ottoman forces crushed a Serbian-Bulgarian coalition, opening the way for further expansion. One by one, Balkan principalities became Ottoman vassals. This expansion brought the Ottomans into direct conflict with the most powerful Serbian leader of the age, Prince Lazar. Confrontation came in 1389 at the Battle of Kosovo, one of the most symbolically charged battles in Balkan history. The battle was brutal and costly. Both Sultan Murad and Prince Lazar were killed, but strategically the Ottomans emerged dominant. Serbian resistance was broken, and the Balkans increasingly fell under Ottoman control. By the time Murad died on the battlefield, the Ottomans had become the dominant power in southeastern Europe. The Byzantines were reduced to little more than Constantinople, their last great stronghold, a once mighty imperial capital. The city was surrounded, the empire a shadow of its former self, and the foundations of a vast Ottoman Empire had been laid. The rise from a small frontier beylik to a regional empire had taken less than a century, and it was driven by three rulers, who each shaped the state in a different way: Osman the founder, Orhan the builder, and Murad the organizer and conqueror. With Murad's death in 1389, the empire passed to his son Bayezid. Bayezid wasted no time. He struck hard, moved fast, and consolidated everything his father had built, earning him the nickname Yildirim, the Thunderbolt. He crushed remaining Serbian resistance, forced Bulgarian and Greek territories into vassalage, and pushed deep into Anatolia, absorbing rival beyliks. By the late 1390s, Bayezid had tightened the noose around Constantinople. For the first time in centuries, the great city faced a real possibility of falling. Bayezid's rise alarmed Christian Europe, and in 1396 a coalition of Western powers responded with the Crusade of Nicopolis, a major attempt to halt the Ottoman advance. It ended in disaster. Bayezid annihilated the Crusader army. The Ottomans looked unstoppable. But just as the empire reached its first peak, a new threat emerged from the east, a conqueror as ruthless and ambitious as any Ottoman sultan. His name was Timur, known in the west as Tamerlane, a Turco-Mongol conqueror seeking to revive the empire of Genghis Khan, devastated Persia, Central Asia and the Middle East before turning on the Ottomans. In 1402, Timur and Bayezid met at the Battle of Ankara. It was one of the largest battles of the medieval world. The defeat was catastrophic. Bayezid was captured and died in captivity. The empire, which had risen so quickly, plunged into civil war. What followed is known as the Ottoman Interregnum, 11 years of civil war between Bayezid's sons. The empire fractured, formal vassals broke away, the Balkans slipped from Ottoman control. Constantinople, briefly relieved, regained breathing space. The Ottomans came close to collapse. But in 1413, Bayezid's son Mehmed emerged victorious. He reunited the state, restored authority, and stabilized the empire. The Ottomans had survived their greatest crisis. Mehmed's son Murad II continued the work of restoration. He reconquered lost Balkan territories, re-established vassalage, and rebuilt the military. But Europe was not finished resisting. In 1444, a coalition of Christian forces launched the Crusade of Varna. Murad crushed it. This cleared the way for a final push on the long-isolated Constantinople. When Mehmed II came to the throne in 1451, at just 19, he had a clear vision: the conquest of Constantinople. The city founded by Constantine the Great had been an imperial capital since 330 AD. For more than 1,000 years it had been the eastern bastion of Christendom, a symbol as much as a fortress. Mehmed prepared meticulously. He assembled a massive army and fleet, and crucially he embraced new technology, enlisting the services of a Hungarian engineer named Orban, who developed massive bombards capable of smashing the city's previously impenetrable walls. In April 1453 the siege began. For weeks the city held out, but on the 29th of May the Ottomans broke through. Constantinople fell. Mehmed II entered the city on a white horse and rode straight to the Hagia Sophia, which he converted into a mosque. He adopted a new imperial title, Kaiser-i-Rom, or Caesar of Rome, asserting that by taking Constantinople he had inherited the mantle of the Roman emperors. The shockwaves were immense. 1453 ended the 1,000-year Byzantine Empire and marked the Ottomans as a true imperial superpower. Many Orthodox Christians still regard Tuesday, the day Constantinople fell, as an unlucky day. Mehmed wasted no time transforming the city into its capital, later known as Istanbul. He made peace with the Orthodox Church, allowing Christians to remain in worship, though under new restrictions. Safe from attack by Christian forces, the city grew into a major trading hub and the administrative heart of the empire. With Constantinople captured and the Byzantine Empire gone, the Ottomans entered a new phase. The empire now controlled the Bosphorus, the eastern Mediterranean and the gateway between continents, but they were not finished expanding. In the early 1500s, Selim turned east. The Safavid Empire in Persia posed both a political and religious threat. At Chaldiran, in 1514, Selim's janissaries, armed with arquebuses, shattered the Safavid cavalry. Eastern Anatolia fell under Ottoman control, and many Kurdish tribes shifted their allegiance. Selim then turned south towards the Mamluk Sultanate, which ruled Syria, Egypt, and the holy cities of Mecca and Medina. The stakes were enormous: the spice trade, pilgrimage routes, and the religious prestige of the Islamic world. Ottoman firepower proved decisive again, delivering a string of victories at Majd-Dibik, Khan Yunis, and Ridaniya, leading to the collapse of the Mamluk state, bringing the Levant, Egypt, and Hejaz, including Mecca and Medina, under Ottoman control. For the first time, the Ottoman Sultan could claim leadership of the Islamic world. Then came Selim's son, Solomon the Magnificent, who would take the empire to its peak. His 46-year reign made the Ottomans the dominant power of their age. More than 15 million people lived under Ottoman rule across what is now Turkey, Greece, Egypt, Syria, Israel, Jordan, Lebanon, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, and large parts of North Africa. Ottoman armies were unmatched: disciplined janissaries, elite cavalry, and formidable artillery. Victory at Mohacs in 1526 destroyed the medieval kingdom of Hungary, while Ottoman fleets dominated the eastern Mediterranean. Istanbul flourished as a centre of art, architecture, science, and medicine, a refuge for Jews fleeing persecution in Europe, and a place where Christians lived under protection in return for loyalty and taxation. But even at its height, warning signs were emerging. The siege of Malta in 1565 ended in failure, and in 1571, at the Battle of Lepanto, a coalition of Catholic powers destroyed the Ottoman fleet, a stunning blow to a navy that had once seemed invincible. After Suleiman's death, the quality of Ottoman rulers declined. Some were competent, others weak, and a few, like Mustafa the Mad, dangerously unstable. Palace intrigue deepened. Young sultans were dominated by their mothers, in a period known as a Sultanate of Women, while real power shifted to the Grand Viziers, as the sultans withdrew into their palace. The empire also faced new external pressures. Russia pushed south, threatening Ottoman territory and trade routes, while Austria challenged Ottoman control in Central Europe. These pressures soon turned into open conflict. In 1683, at the Battle of Vienna, a Christian coalition broke the Ottoman siege on the city with the biggest cavalry charge in history. More than 18,000 horsemen smashed into Ottoman lines. The defeat marked a turning point, leading to the Treaty of Karlowit in 1699, which forced the Ottomans to surrender large territories. They would never again be a serious threat to Europe. At the same time, the economic foundations of Ottoman power were eroding. When European ships began sailing around Africa, the old Silk routes collapsed. Trade that had once flowed through Ottoman lands now moved by sea, bypassing the empire entirely, and with it went much of the wealth that had sustained it. By the mid-1700s, the balance of power had shifted decisively against the Ottomans. Russia, under Catherine the Great, emerged as a dominant force in the region and relentlessly pushed south. Sultan Mustafa III recognized the danger and attempted to modernize the army with Prussian training, but these early reforms were limited and resisted. The crisis came with the Russo-Turkish War of 1768, a military catastrophe. In 1771, Russia seized the Crimean Khanate, an Ottoman vassal of more than 250 years, and the war ended with a humiliating treaty granting Russia access to the Black Sea and the right to intervene on behalf of Orthodox Christians inside the empire. By the early 19th century, the empire's weakness was so apparent that the Russian Tsar Nicholas I famously called it the sick man of Europe. Additionally, the Ottomans struggled to keep pace with technological change as religious leaders denounced artillery and the printing press as instruments of evil. Europe surged ahead in science, industry, and military technology while the empire stagnated. The need for reform became undeniable when Napoleon invaded Ottoman-controlled Egypt in 1798. At Abu Qir, French forces lost just 220 men, while the Ottomans suffered more than 8,000 casualties, a brutal demonstration of how far the empire had fallen behind. Reformers recognized the danger, and Selim III launched a more ambitious modernization program: European training, modern artillery, new uniforms, and a new order army. But the Janissaries, once elite, now hereditary and corrupt, revolted, overthrew Selim, and murdered him. It wasn't until 1826 that the corps was abolished. Their destruction removed a major obstacle to reform, but it came too late to stop forces now pulling the empire apart. Nationalism tore at the empire from within. Greece won independence in 1829. Serbia, Romania, and Bulgaria followed. The empire's multi-ethnic structure, once a strength, could not survive the age of nationalism. European powers exploited Ottoman weakness. Russia pushed for influence, Austria-Hungary expanded into the Balkans, and although Britain and France, fearing Russian dominance, supported the Ottomans in the Crimean War, they seized Ottoman territory when it suited them. The Tanzimat reforms of the mid-1800s modernized parts of the state, but they couldn't fix the deeper structural problems. In the 1870s, a global financial crash hit the empire hard. Flooding and drought in Anatolia caused crop failures and food shortages, sparking unrest and rebellion, especially in the Balkans. Russia seized the opportunity, went to war again, and in 1878 the empire lost most of its remaining Balkan territories. In 1908, a group of reformist officers and intellectuals known as the Young Turks forced the Sultan to restore the suspended constitution and reopen parliament. But optimism didn't last. A dominant faction from within, led by Enver Pasha, seized control and ruled as a virtual dictatorship. Under Enver, the empire found itself increasingly isolated. Its traditional allies, Britain and France, were drawing closer to Russia, and fearing Russian expansion, the Ottoman leadership began to look to Germany, whose military efficiency they admired. Berlin offered modern weapons, advisors, and a promise of protection as Europe slid toward war. During the First World War, the Ottomans allied with Germany won some notable victories, including the defence of Gallipoli, but suffered catastrophic defeats elsewhere. One of the most damaging blows came from within the empire itself. In 1916, the Arab Revolt, supported by Lawrence of Arabia, conducted guerrilla attacks on Ottoman railways, garrisons, and supply lines. As the revolt spread across Arabia, Ottoman control collapsed. By 1918, British and Arab forces had taken Aqaba, Damascus, and much of the Levant, stripping the empire of its Arab provinces. During the war, the empire's treatment of its Armenian population resulted in the deaths of up to 1.5 million people, who were massacred or died during brutal forced marches. Final defeat came in 1918, brought occupation and partition. Allied troops entered Istanbul, and the Treaty of Sèvres carved the empire into pieces. Britain and France took control of much of the Middle East. Italy claimed territory in southwestern Anatolia. Greece, citing its historic ties to Byzantium, landed troops on the Aegean coast and pushed inland. Anatolia itself, the Ottoman heartland, now faced the prospect of being divided under foreign rule. The treaty provoked outrage. Many saw it as a betrayal of the Ottoman government, which had accepted the terms. In this crisis, a new nationalist movement emerged, led by a military officer named Mustafa Kemal. He vowed to overturn the treaty and defend the Turkish homeland. Over the next 4 years, his forces fought both the occupying armies and the remnants of the Ottoman administration. Their victory led to the Treaty of Lausanne in 1923, which recognized the Republic of Turkey. Mustafa Kemal, later given the name Ataturk, became its first president and remains a national hero. After more than 6 centuries, the Ottoman Empire was gone, and its former provinces would form the modern states of the Middle East. It is difficult to imagine we will see an empire quite like the Ottomans again. From a small Anatolian principality, it rose through ambitious leadership, military innovation, and a willingness to adapt into a power that dominated 3 continents for centuries. Few empires lasted as long or left such a profound mark, but in the end, it could not keep pace with the modern world. Its legacy still echoes in today's borders and conflicts.